we need to understand that Globix has got nothing to do with Gibraltar other than the man that was leading the drive to persuade people to put money in was Gibraltarian. So Globix was a company from the British Virgin Islands. They weren't licensed, they weren't approved, they had no consent to operate from Gibraltar. And so to what extent is that a Gibraltar problem?
Well, a lot of the investors were from Gibraltar.
That's because the main person seeking those investments was Gibraltarian. And so he tapped the people that he knew and persuaded them to invest money.
Did you know
that
this was
damages
all happening? But did you know all this was happening?
No.
You had no idea, because a sitting MP apparently was also an investor.
Look, there are obviously many investors. If it's £42 million, an awful lot of people that put their money in. But, you know, any investment anyone makes should be aware of the risk. Has this done crypto industry good or harm? It's done it harm. But let's not confuse Gibraltar PLC harm and crypto as an industry harm, because there is no Gibraltar PLC involvement. There is no licensed business, regulated business involved in this at all.
I get that, but the fact is, it's an outside firm, it's unregulated, I don't want to say too much about how it's been operating, because we can read what we've read in our GBC reports about how the money was spent on Fendi and Louis Vuitton and all that sort of stuff. Okay, so how you described FTX being a scam and a fraud, you know, the way that operated, I don't think it's too dissimilar, let's say, to some of the stories that are coming out with regards to Globix. But the fact is, we have a regulatory framework in Gibraltar to protect this jurisdiction, and yet somebody from out there has come into our pond and has gone fishing and has caught an awful lot of fish, and we've just stood by and let that happen. I mean, should we not have
I think when the
protected our investors more?
Any of those investors could have come to the regulator and say, I've been asked to put money into here. Are you aware of this? Because we weren't. Regulator wasn't
at all.
Nobody came forward and made a complaint to the regulator. So, you know, you can only do what you're dealing with. And if somebody's going to break the law, assuming that they did, I don't know if they did or they didn't, I assume they did, then there is a process to follow once a complaint is made, and you understand that. I think this is now being looked at in that vein. Has there been a breach of our legislation? Has there been an offence committed? And those are the things that now need to be investigated to determine that.
Would you not? It's interesting. We did an interview with Scott Cipollina, who is a financial analyst or reporter at the Times, the Financial Times, and he said that, well, he suggested that more could be done to protect investors going forward. Is that something that we would potentially look at? I mean, what sort of safeguards could you introduce? Perhaps more information available about the cowboys out there?
Forgive me, but that message needs to be given to the United Kingdom government, who have zero. I mean, how anybody can come to Gibraltar and say you need to do more when we've done more than anyone else has in terms of making the activity illegal unless you're licensed.
Yeah.
Well, the UK doesn't have that, or any other jurisdiction in the world. How somebody can come and say that Gibraltar should do more, I think is nonsense.
Okay, but can I just say something? It has happened.
Yeah.
We don't want it to happen again.
No, of course not.
So what safeguards would you introduce?
Okay, so we've got to get better at ensuring that we are policing the periphery to get smarter at understanding if anybody tries to do anything like this again. Because if that person had gone to the regulator and said, I'm going to be doing this, which is what they should have done, but they didn't, they'd have been told you can't do that unless you go through this process. They've got to be regulated. You've got to have corporate governance. You've got to have fit and proper people on the board. You've got to have the capital. You've got to have the business plan. This was from the reports that I'm hearing, nothing more than a Ponzi scheme. But look, this is all going through a process which it has to go through, both in terms of the liquidation process and in terms of any investigations that the regulator or the police might be doing.
I think that's all Scott was suggesting, that, you know...
Well, I agree with him on that, absolutely.
Yeah, that's all he was suggesting.
That we now have a duty to investigate,
yes,
to understand if we could have done more. That's perfectly legitimate. But to suggest that as a jurisdiction, we've got to protect ourselves better from this when we've got a regulatory framework in place that nobody else has, I don't think is reasonable.
So what
That's
would
the point
what
I
would
make.
your first advice be to somebody who's looking to invest in one of these really exciting new crypto companies? What would your first piece of advice be to them?
If somebody's offering you 1% per day, engage brain, it's got to be nonsense.
Right. And the fact that Damien Carreras is Gibraltarian, is
Yeah.
that going to harm us because he is Gibraltarian?
Well, look,
Even though the company wasn't a regulator,
I think the publicity we've
Gibraltar.
got,
Yeah.
negative publicity we've got, is only because there's a Gibraltarian involved. Because it's a BVI company.